Welcome to this recorded part of the modules of the Rework project about flexible working methods and innovative work environments. This project is funded by Erasmus+, and these presentations follow the module structures and it's connected to the modules of this project. The presentation will be around 15 to 20 minutes and it's about module 4. So today we are going to explore flexible working methods and innovative work environments in chapter 4 as presented in this module. This session examines how work has fundamentally changed in the recent years. We will look at the cost at this shift, what flexible work really means in practice and what models exist, what benefits and risks come with it, and finally what this means for vocational education and training. This is not just about remote work. It is about a structural transformation in how we define productivity, leadership, responsibility, and professional life. Here next to me, we keep it short. It's about the chapter overview of the things we will discuss today. If you want to look back to it, you can pause the video and you can see what we talk about. Before I start this session, I want to have a special appreciation to all of the partners of the Rework project next to me for creating these amazing modules and all the content they've been creating. So thank you for this. So the first slide is the structural shift in work, and then we think about then COVID as a starting point. But it's not actually started in the beginning of 2020, but it's more that the pandemic acted as a catalyst. So before COVID-19, digital tools already were allowed for remote communication and flexible scheduling. However, many organizations may still maintain the 9-to-5 office structures because of their habits or culture. When the pandemic forced remote work on a global scale, like millions of employees experienced autonomy in ways they never had before. They discovered that productivity could occur outside of the office and they realized commuting time could be reduced. So they really began reflecting on work-life balance and mental health, and this experience changed expectations, really. So what we're witnessing now is a shift from present-based work, where we are more looking towards an outcome-based work, so where results matter more than location. This is fundamentally a culture shift. It challenges traditional power dynamics and hierarchical control systems. So at the same time, we are witnessing the gradual decline of rigid 9-to-5 model. This does not mean that complete disappearance of the structure, but it does mean that fixed hours in a fixed locations are no longer considered the only legitimate way to organize work. Hybrid systems, flexible starting times, compressed work weeks, and so on are becoming more normalized. Most importantly, this transformation reflects a cultural shift in expectation. Work is no longer defined purely by visibility or time spent in an office. It is defined by outcomes, trust, communication, and results. Employees expect transparency from their leaders and they expect the boundaries and they expect flexibility to be a part of the organizational culture rather than expectations. So in summary, the most post-pandemic period did not really change the way we work but it changed and where we work, but it changed how we think about work and how we integrate it into our lives and how organizations must respond to this. So in this slide, it visually illustrates the rapid increase in remote work and hybrid work in the beginning of 2020. So notice how sharply the numbers rise during the pandemic period, but what's the most significant in this thing is that the levels remain elevated even after the restrictions of COVID-19 were lifted. So this tells us something important. Flexible work is not temporary crisis response, but it's really embedded in our organizational structures. Hybrid models in particular have stabilized as a new norm in many sectors. So this sustained adaptation demonstrates that flexibility has shifted from an experiment to an expectation. When we talk about the Great Resignation, we are referring to a global wave of voluntary job exits that accelerated after the pandemic. So it's important to emphasize that these resignations were not primarily driven by economic collapse or unemployment, but totally instead they were driven by dissatisfaction of their organizations. Employees were not leaving because there were no jobs, but they were leaving because they believed they deserved better jobs. So we divided it into 3 points, and the first key element is mass voluntary job exit. So in many countries, resignation rates reached historic heights. Entire sectors such as healthcare and hospitality experienced significant turnovers. So this created like a labor shortage and forced organizations to rethink how to attract and retain talent. But what made this movement significant was its voluntary nature. People were actively choosing to leave, and it suggested that employees felt confident enough to prioritize their own needs over job security. The second element is the search of meaning and flexibility. So during the pandemic, many individuals had time to reflect and they reconsidering their priorities and long-term goals. Questions such as, does this job align with my personal life? Is this work sustainable for my mental health? Became central. Employees increasingly sought roles and they offer different purposes, growth, etc. But work was no longer viewed only as a source of income. It was evaluated as part of an overall life satisfaction. The third element is the rejection of unsupportive cultures. So many organizations maintain a rigid 9-to-5 hierarchies, poor communication practices, and it was all based on control rather than trust. During the pandemic, these weaknesses became more visible. Employees became less willing to, for example, micromanagement or poor work-life boundaries. So the Great Resignation functioned as a collective message. It communicated that outdated management styles and unsupportive cultures were no longer acceptable. So the Great Resignation is not just a labor market trend, but it represents a turning point in the relationship between employees and employers. It accelerated the move forward to flexibility, autonomy, and trust-based systems. When we talk about quiet quitting, it is important to clarify what it actually means. So quiet quitting does not mean that employees are resigning or refusing to work, but it refers to a shift in how employees define their work commitment to work. Workers continue to perform their contractual responsibilities, but they will not go and avoid being beyond than what was formerly required. So the first element is boundary setting behavior. It is traditional work, especially in competitive sectors. Employees were often expected to go above and beyond, but such as mediating conflicts or supporting colleagues without formal recognition. So quiet quitting represents a decision to reestablish boundaries. Employees are saying, I will perform my job well, but I will not sacrifice my mental health or personal time or unpaid energy. This reflects on growing awareness of burnout and the importance of sustainability in work practice. The second element is rejecting overwork culture. For many years, overwork was often rewarded, being interpreted like as dedication. Long hours were seen as a sign of ambition, but the chronic overwork reduces productivity, increases errors, and negatively affects mental and physical health after research. Quiet quitting challenges the narrative that commitment equals exhaustion. In this sense, quiet quitting is not laziness, but it is resistance to unsustainable expectations. The third element is that quiet quitting functions as a cultural signal of fatigue. Many employees experience emotional exhaustion after the pandemic. Remote work blurred boundaries, care responsibilities increased, and job insecurities and uncertainty created stress. It also reveals a mismatch between organizational expectations and employee well-being. When we talk about flexible work, it is important to understand what flexibility is not one single practice. It operates across multiple dimensions, so we break it down in four key components. So let's start with the first one, flexibility in time. So work was organized around fixed hours, 9 to 5. Employees were expected to begin and end their workday at the time they predetermined. But flexibility in time challenges that assumption. It includes models such as flex time, where employees can choose their start and end dates. They can where full-time hours are completed over fewer days. Time flexibility recognizes that productivity is not identical for everyone at the same hours. Some individuals, maybe are working better in the morning, others later in the day. So it allows employees to manage caregiving responsibilities, appointments more effectively. However, without clear boundaries, work can easily expand into their personal life. So that is one of the problems. So the next step is flexibility in the location. It refers to the ability to work outside the office environment. This includes fully remote work, hybrid models, combining office and remote presence, and even work from anywhere system that allow cross-border mobility. Location flexibility reduce commuting time, expand talent pools, and allow organizations to recruit beyond geographical limits. It can improve inclusions for individuals with mobility limitations or caregiving duties. But at the same time, it introduces some challenges. Teams must maintain communication, cohesion, and shared identity when they are not physically co-located. So the third point is flexibility in the work process. It refers to how tasks are organized and executed. For example, asynchronous collaborations allow team members to complete tasks at different times rather than simultaneously. Agile workflows operate in the short cycle with continuous feedback rather than rigid long-term planning. Process flexibility increases responsiveness and autonomy, but it required clarity in communication and strong coordinating systems. The last point, but maybe also the most important one, is outcome-based accountability. Managers often measure productivity by time spent at work or physical visibility. Instead of asking, were you present? Organizations ask, did you achieve the agreed objective? This shift transforms leadership styles. Managers must define clear expectations, set measurement goals, and trust their employees to meet them. Employees must manage their time, responsibility, and communicate progress transparently. In summary, flexible work operates across time, location, and process dimension, but it functions effectively only when supported by a clear, structured, and trust-based leadership. There are several core models of flexibility work, and each presents a different degree of type autonomy. Let's begin with flex time. Flex time allows employees to choose their start and end times within agreed boundaries. They can start between 7 and 10 in the morning and finish accordingly. This model increases daily schedule control when maintaining structure. Compressed work weeks, where employees complete full-time hours in over fewer days, for example, 4 days of 10 hours instead of 5 from 8. This provides extended rest periods while preserving workloads and expectations. Then we have the raw, results-only work environment. This is one of the most radical models. Employees are evaluated solely on their results, so there are no fixed hours or mandatory presence required. Last one is hybrid and remote work. Remote work is fully locational independent. Hybrid work combines office and remote presence. Hybrid has become particularly common because it's balanced autonomy with in-person collaboration. If we look at the first graph, we see that the models like raw and hybrid typically involve higher autonomy levels compared to flex time or compressed weeks. In the second graph, you will see the hybrid models tend to have a higher adaptation rate across sectors, while more radical systems like raw are less common. The illustrates our important points. The more autonomy a model provides, the stronger organizational trust and accountability systems must be. Workspaces today are no longer designed around fixed desks and rigid layouts. They are being reimagined to support flexibility, collaboration, and well-being. Let's begin with zoned physical offices. So instead of rows of identical desks, they are maybe quiet areas for deep concentration, collaborative areas for teamwork, and even relaxation zones. The idea behind this is that some tasks require different environments. Creative brainstorming benefits from open interaction, for example. Flexible offices respond to these differences rather than assuming one layout fits all tasks. So the next one is hot desking, and hot desking means employees do not have a permanently assigned desk. Instead, they choose their workspace depending on their needs of the day. However, it is also required strong organizational systems such as booking tools, and they can affect employees' sense of belonging if not implemented carefully. So the third one is digital collaboration platforms, and the modern workspace are not only physical, but as you know, are also digital. So tools like shared document platforms or messaging tools or video conference system created virtual work environment. These platforms allow teams to collaborate across locations and time zones. And finally, the biophilic design. Biophilic design integrates natural elements into the workspace, such as a lot of plants, natural light, wood materials, and open airflow. Research showed that exposure to natural elements can reduce stress, improve concentration, and enhance overall well-being. This reflects an important shift. Workspaces are no longer designed solely for efficiency, but they are also designed to support mental health and sustainable productivity. Flexible work was both strong advantages and important risks. It's essential to understand both sides in order to implement its responsibility. So let's begin with the benefits. Flexible schedule and remote options allow employees to reduce commuting time, managing caregiving responsibilities, and giving even more personal space for recovery. The ability to restructure work around life rather than life around work is one of the most frequently reported advantages of flexibility. So the second one is greater autonomy. It means having control over how and when tasks are complete. So when employees feel trusted to manage their responsibilities, engaged often improves. Now, if we look at the graph on this slide, we see that work-life balance and autonomy show relative high positive perception levels. This visually reinforces that employees strongly value these aspects. However, it also shows something equally important. So on the risk side, isolation concerns are significant. When employees work remotely from extended periods, they experience reduced informal interactions between colleagues. Over time, this can affect belonging, team cohesion, and even innovation. Finally, burnout risks can be a blur boundary between work and personal life. Flexibility. When the workspace is at home and digital tools are always accessible, it becomes harder to disconnect. In the graph, we see that isolation and burnout still register a notable level. This highlights the dual reality of flexible work. It increases autonomy and balance for many, but it can also intensify stress if not carefully managed. So the key takeaway from this slide is that flexibility is not automatically positive. It can also impact leadership practices, communication clarity, and workload management. Successful flexible system maximize autonomy and balance while actively migrating isolations and burnout. When flexible work offers many benefits, it can also have a lot of risks. So if we talk about them, it's about blurred boundaries, for example. The work is no longer tied to physical office or fixed hours, so the separation between professional and personal life becomes less clear. For example, employees start answering emails late or feeling the pressure to be constantly available. So without those clear organizational norms, flexibility can unintentionally extend working hours and rather than reducing them. That can increase to stress and long-term burnout. So the next one is digital divide. Flexibility works dependently or heavily on digital infrastructure. So not all employees have good internet or have quiet workspaces or etc. Right? So those structural inequalities, that you see that stronger technical skills may perform more effectively while others face hidden disadvantages. The third is the care burden inequality. So caregiving responsibilities such as childcare or elder care or often disappropriate affect women. Flexible work can help manage these responsibilities, but it can also intensify them. Without supportive policies and equal workload distribution, flexible systems may intentionally widen gender gaps. The last one is visibility bias. So a hybrid system employees who are physically present in the office may receive more informal recognition instead of the people that are working remotely because they're just less visible. Over time, this can influence promotion, salary progression, and career development. So visibility bias highlights an important leadership responsibility. Performances must be evaluated based on the outcomes and not on the proximity. If flex work introduces new risks and challenges, then the next logical question is what skills are required to be successful in this environment? So if we talk about one, it's time management. Employees arrived at fixed times, took breaks, predictable moments, and left the end of the day. In flexible systems, much of that structure just disappears, especially when working remotely. Effective time management in flexibility context means setting clear working hours, protecting focus time, and ensure that work does not constantly spill into personal life. The second key is digital communication. A remote or hybrid teams, much communication happens through written messaging or video calls and shared documents. So this delays in response can create misunderstandings, so therefore professionals must communicate clearly about expectations, deadlines, and availability. The next one is adaptability. Flexible environments evolve quickly. Tools change. Employers must be comfortable with uncertainty, capable of adjusting to new system without losing productivity. Finally, accountability. In outcome-based systems, accountability becomes central. Employees must take responsibility for delivering results without constant supervision. If workplaces are transforming, education cannot remain static. Vocational education and training must respond directly to the structural change, and we have discussed throughout this lecture. Preparing learners for a more modern labor market means preparing them for flexibility. Let us begin with flexible pedagogy. Flexible pedagogy means that teaching methods themselves reflect the realities of flexible work. This can include offering varied assignments, formats, blended learning modules, and digital collaboration tool. The next one is project-based learning. So it's more modern workspaces increasingly operate through projects rather than fixed repetitive tasks. So these mirrors outcome-based accountability system in flexible workspaces. We have a third one that's hybrid collaboration simulation. So many organizations now operate in hybrid formats. Students should experience working in both in-person and online team environments. This could involve virtual teamwork, exercise, remote presentation, and shared digital workspaces across location. Finally, autonomy development. Perhaps the most important competency in flexible systems is self-management. Education should gradually encourage learners to take ownership to their learning process and setting goals, managing deadlines, and reflecting performances. As we conclude this lecture, it is important to step back and reflect on this broader picture. First, flexible work represents a structural transformation. This is not simply a temporary trend caused by global crisis. It reflects a long-term shift in how organizations define productivity, leadership, accountability, and professional identity. The traditional model of fixed hours, fixed location, and present-based evaluation is no longer dominant across many sectors. Second is flexible work has dual nature. It brings significant benefits, improved work-life balance, increases autonomy, and greater organizational resilience. However, it also introduces risks such as burnout, blurred boundaries, visibility bias. Flexibility is not inherently positive. It also depends entirely on how it's designed and implemented. Third, there is the equity imperative. Without intentional policies, clear evaluation criteria, and inclusive leadership benefits some groups more than others. So it needs to be clear on that point. Finally, there's a clear need for educational adaptation. Vocational education and training institutes have responsibility to prepare learners for these evolving work environments. Education must not lag behind labor market transformations. It must actively anticipate to respond to it. To conclude, flexible work is reshaping not only where we work, but how we lead, and how we learn. The challenge is not whether flexibility will remain, it will. The challenge is not how we implement it responsibility, equitably, and sustainability. Thank you for your attention, and if you want to know more about the Rework project, check out the other modules in this section. Thank you.